I'd like to talk about various steps that might be taken to move the island towards sustainability. In asking myself that question, it became very clear to me that I have to separate my answers into two parts. The first part, what we can do now, and the second part, what we can do later once the so-called peak oil crisis hits us. And the reason I make this distinction is that I think probably most of you realize that within a very few years, the total global oil production is going to peak and go into a permanent decline with about 3% per annum, while the demand is continuing to increase at about 2% per annum. There are some debate about the exact timing of this, but the people who I trust most, the experts in the geological field, oil geologists, they pretty much agree on this. And the problem is that when this reality hits the financial markets, there's going to be a much worse kind of crisis than we're experiencing right now. We're experiencing a financial crisis today, and it's very different from a resource crisis. Resource crisis hits the main economy. A finance crisis will, in all likelihood, only have a relatively minor effect on the real economy. That's why I have to separate the two. And the problem is that unless the people and the politicians are behind it, it's very, very difficult to make real reforms because they will continue on the same path until they're forced to change. So what can we do in the meantime? I would mention two things in particular that I would make recommendations on. One concerns education. Education for how to design sustainable societies. And this is going to be the subject of Hildur's talk, so I won't go into any more detail in that, other than to say that I would recommend that in some way we encourage all the people of Mallorca to take this education, which is available in Spanish and English at the Open University of Catalonia beginning next month. And just as a general introduction to the whole set of problems, the holistic problems associated with this whole task. The other thing which I'd like to mention as a specific recommendation has to do with energy. And this is based on just my last 3 days traveling around this island. I noticed that it's an ideal place for what I would call micro-hydro. Micro-hydro is a way of utilizing water to produce electricity. And it can be, the micro-hydro technology is quite well known and quite simple. Basically, you collect water on the top of your mountains, in a large reservoir, and it goes through a small pipe, falls maybe 50, 100, 200 meters, and it creates electricity through a small turbine. And this electricity can be used either to charge batteries, which could be used in electric cars, or to run your household, or it could possibly be fed into the electric grid. But in either case, my impression of it is that Mallorca has the ideal circumstances for this, because you have the mountains and you have the people living in close proximity to the mountains. So that's something I would suggest that you get a hold of some people who know about this area and do a study of the potential for the whole of the island to utilize micro-hydro. And I suspect you can get financial support either from the Spanish government or from the EU, or possibly from the Kyoto Protocol CO2 credit plan. All of these plans are looking for this kind of project, which is entirely CO2 neutral. In fact, micro-hydro is probably the cleanest and cheapest form of energy, more or less about the same level as wind energy in terms of cost and efficiency. So let me move on then to, I would say, after the peak oil hits us, the situation is going to be very different. First of all, the oil prices are going to explode because of the difference in supply and demand. And that's going to mean that, in particularly two particular areas are going to be hit very hard. One is food production, because most of our food is produced by industrial methods, which is almost entirely dependent on oil. Everything in the whole industrial chemical production of food is almost oil-based. That means food is going to become very, very expensive. The second factor which is going to be hit is transportation, and in particular air travel. That means that, of course, as several people have noted, that Mallorca is especially vulnerable on both these counts. But it's not only Mallorca that's going to be hit, it's going to be all over the world. There's going to be probably a long period of of great hardship. But what can we do in a circumstances like this? Well, there are a number of things we can do. One of the things I would emphasize is, as a kind of a headline, is to keep your wealth creation local. That is the key to everything. What happens in the current economic system is that much of the wealth that you create here is being channeled outside of the country to the nearest financial center in Madrid, in New York, and so forth. You have a lot more wealth here than you're aware of if you some leaking out of the island. And so one of the first things you should do is what actually Susan George was suggesting, a kind of an input-output analysis of the whole island. What is going in, what is going out, what's it costing? Where can we make so-called import substitution? Where can we produce something locally instead of importing it? Because you're going to have to think very hard about how to survive in this environment. And the next thing is you're going to have to think in terms of food production, because it's going to become an economic necessity and advantage to produce your own food. It's going to simply be cheaper to do it that way, and you're going to have to reinvent your traditions in terms of food production. Another thing which I think is very important to keep in mind is local ownership of your companies. In particular, this is true in the banking area. You need to focus on having local banks who are investing the monies which you are depositing with them in local projects and not sending it to Madrid. That's a very important point. And in that connection, I think you should also consider the possibility of creating your own local currency. A local currency has the effect that you can trade with each other with this local currency, and the money then automatically stays in the local community. And the key to a local currency project is food production. So as long as there are people producing food and others who need the food, they can provide various services in return. And this is the way you create local wealth. You don't have to have investment from the outside to do this. As Jose was saying, you can do it without any money. And it's been done throughout history. Every time there's been a major crisis through history, going back many centuries, local currencies have arisen automatically. And they will continue to do so in this next crisis. So, another thing I'd like to throw up, one of the things that's also struck me is how poor use you're making of your rainwater in this island. Not only should you be using it to create electricity, but after running through the turbines, you could use the same water, for irrigation, for example, on the terraces and elsewhere on the plains, using modern drop techniques for irrigating, which does not even need a lot of water, and it's quite efficient. It's a known technology. And of course, could also be used in for household water, although not for drinking normally. Also, you could also use it for you could use biological wastewater treatment, another thing which is very typical of many sustainable communities. Then another thing which I think I would recommend is that you really make an effort to politically establish a sustainable fisheries area around all the islands. And this may seem rather impossible today because it's, among other things, against the rules of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. But one of the good things about the crisis is that the WTO is probably going to collapse very quickly. And what's going to happen is many countries are going to introduce protectionist policies of various kinds, which is, of course, against the WTO. Because everybody's going to be thinking of themselves, how do we survive? And keeping out imports which are often being subsidized by foreign corporations and undercutting local food production and so forth. So with the WTO out of the way, it might be much easier to insist upon having an area around the islands which is only available for local fishermen. And the argument here is not so much commercial as it is food security. And I think it should be a right for any island or island group to be able to have first rights to the fish in their areas. This is something I think you might even want to think about working together with the, there's a group within the United Nations called the Association of Island States, which has this very similar problem. And I think that this is something which might even be taken up with them. Well, you may have some problems within the EU, because even in the EU, there are restrictions that would not allow this to happen. But I think if enough political pressure is put on the political leadership, that this might in fact be acceptable under these crisis circumstances that are coming. Another little idea I have, which I could just throw up, is the following: that in a crisis, as I foresee it happening here on the island, there are two basic ways you can react. One is everybody pull together and have a common vision as to how to tackle the problems. This is what we're talking about here today. But there also is another possible option, which some people may choose, and that is to exploit the situation, to continue to make as much money as they can, especially foreign firms and so forth. So one idea we might think about introducing is what I call mandatory philanthropy, which means that if someone earns more than a certain maximum level, the tax goes up to 100%. And the level, if we go back to the 1950s, the level in the United States and most countries in Europe was about 12 to 1. In other words, the top guy in the company earned roughly 12 times the average worker. And that's a good starting point, although maybe you should be a bit higher. That's negotiable. But if you introduce such a plan, then you can say that anyone who earns more than that can give some priorities as to what kinds of projects that have been approved by the government that he would like to invest in. Maybe he'd like to invest in sustainable fisheries or some form of ecological project or social project. And in this way, he's becoming a philanthropist. He's making some choices, and it could be also certain status associated with the projects he supports and so forth. And if there are people who don't like that, let them leave the island. And when the people who are left, we can work together. Another thing I'd just like to mention briefly is, I think this island is also ideal for electric cars.
Yes.
Especially combined with the micro-hydro. See, the micro-hydro can produce the batteries. If you have a few stations around the country where you can go in, just like you go to a gas station today and switch your used-up batteries for fresh ones, you see, that way you can feed the electrical cars. So I have a vision of this island that maybe in another 10 years or whatever it takes, there may be no fossil fuel-driven cars, that's just electric, and all driven by your own energy sources. Now, I don't know whether you have enough micro-hydro to do that. That needs a more detailed engineering study. But I think you can go a long way. And I'd also like to throw up another thing. Somebody mentioned this idea about this tax on tourists that was rejected a few years back because it was done in a very poor way. Because it forced people to line up at the hotel when they arrived and start paying £1 or whatever. I think this should be an airport tax.
Yes.
There are airport taxes all over Europe, and it wouldn't even be noticeable. And since we know how long people usually are coming, they could just pay upon landing as they go through the normal checkpoints. And that money then could be put into a fund to improve the environment for these various projects. Because after all, the argument is that the argument is that when tourists come to the island, they are creating a very substantially larger ecological footprint. Very large. It's probably even larger than the people who are living here permanently. And so they should be contributing to that. And they also want to have a good environment. After all, they want to have clean water and have a good time.
More ideas can come in discussion?
Yeah, I'll just see if I have any more things to throw out. No, I guess that's about it. I'll just say that in terms of what not to do, I think we should avoid top-down solutions. I think we have to work from the bottom up, from grassroots movements like this, with people all working together and putting pressure on the political. Okay.
Thank you.
Like 40, 50, 30, 20 years ago, people set out realizing what was going to happen, realizing the situation we are in now. And they said, we have to start all over. We have to redefine how we want as people to live with each other and with nature. And they did so. And they have done enormous experiments in many different countries of the world. And it's exciting. It has happened everywhere. And when we started wanting to use our capacity and our knowledge in the best way possible. The idea came up that what we should do was to create a network among all these projects, because they had done all the experiences and it was possible. You could see it. It was real. And we created these networks. We were a big group of people. We have networks in many different European countries. We have a European network. We have a North-South American networks divided in 8 groups. We have an Asian networks and so forth. And we have spent the last 15 years building up all these networks. And I sat down, and I was in the coordinating office in Copenhagen, and so I heard a lot of, I didn't visit all of them, but I met a lot of these people, and I heard, and I sat there with my ears like, oh, fantastic, oh, that's a wonderful idea. And so what I did was I tried to get all the best ideas that I heard about from all over the world together in this book. And I tried to organize them after what we now call the sustainability circle or the sustainability mandala. So the thing is that it's like a very broad concept of what sustainability is. Now we have changed this a little bit. We have added an economic part. So now it's not just 3, it's red, that is the social. We have an economic section, we have an ecological, and we have a worldview section. But the content is the same. Formerly, we just spread the economic in the different parts, whether it was global economics or whether it was local or whether it's what like ecological economics. And this book has now been out for 8 years. And it was very exciting for me to produce this book, to see if all the people in the movement would accept that I produced this book. And I never heard any criticism of it, which of course made me very happy, because I was very nervous about taking on the responsibility of organizing all these experiments and systematizing it. And from this book, we developed an education. We met the first time we met was in 1998. I wanted to celebrate my husband's 60th birthday. And I invited 50 people from all over the world. I asked them, would you like to be part of creating an education where we get all these ideas together in one common curriculum? Is it possible to create one curriculum for the whole world? Do we have really a common vision of how to solve all these problems, where we see everybody on this planet having equal worth? And I think that's basic, because that's part of the worldview. The worldview we need to have is that everybody on this planet needs to have the same recognition as humans. We cannot sit in one part of the world and exploit the rest. We need to create a lifestyle which is possible for everybody. So that was the starting point of this. And people came, and everybody wanted to be part of creating this education, and we started testing it out in Findhorn and Crystal Waters in many places. And then we met again in 2002 and 2004, and finally in 2005 the education was launched. We call it the Eco-Village Design Education, and so far it's a 1-month course covering all the aspects of sustainability: the social, the worldview, the ecological, and economic. And I think it's important to say that the social part is as important as ecological. If you hear the climate debate today, if you read the papers, if you read the books, I haven't read your books, so I'll make a reservation about that. But all the things I've seen so far, they deal with the technological changes. We need to save energy, and we need to create new technologies. We need to solve all this with technological thinking. And it's very much the male who are making this discussion. And I think our task is to spread this out, to say this is also a worldview discussion. It's also a social discussion. We need to create new social structures to be able to create true sustainability. We need to learn to cooperate. We need to learn to solve conflicts. We need to learn a lot of things which we have forgotten. It's not only the agriculture which has been ruined, it's also the social systems which are not there anymore. We need to recreate all of it. And our first idea was to create a sustainability movement, but we realized that we needed to work with the projects who had already done it, because else it was too difficult to see how the synergy worked. So that's why we have been working with eco-villages. But really, our purpose was to make a model which could be used in all local areas of the world. And this is the first time it's happening. You come from all different works. You have a chance of making this island really a place which is truly sustainable. You can decide to have it done in 10, 20 years, come up with a plan and finding the paths which are possible here. The paths here will be different from the path in other areas. The paths in the global south will be different from the path in the suburban area in Copenhagen. The path is different in many different places, like the urban, which is also very different. The education that we have made, which has now been tested in 39 times in 6 continents. People are very happy with it. We use the same curriculum, but we teach it differently, of course, depending on what kind of local community we are in. If I would teach 1 month here, I would teach it differently than I would in Denmark. But the values and the vision would be the same. The last thing that we have done, and you can read about this education on www.gaiaeducation.org. And you can download our curriculum for free. You can download reports about how it works. You can download the first of 4 keys that we have been producing in support of education. The 4 keys is like, the first book is a social book. It's Beyond You and Me. Experiences for Building Community. The next book is coming out in a few weeks. It will be the Worldview book. It's been called The Song of the Earth, the emerging synthesis of science and spirituality. And the last 2 books will come in the next year. But the first is available and you can download it from the internet. And very soon it will always also be in Spanish. And the reason it will be in Spanish is very special because Ulysses from near Barcelona convinced the Open University of Catalonia that they should put our education on the internet. They were looking for some sustainability project, and they found out that this was a very holistic approach and very easily could be translated into virtual, and that has happened. Ross and I, we sat last spring, 3 months, writing the worldview part for the education. It was a big challenge because we had to think of this has to be acceptable for everybody all around the world, and it should still cover what we feel is really important and right. And this new education is called the Gaia Education Design for Sustainability. The reason we focus on design is that design is the way you can integrate all these different aspects. Every one of these different social, worldview, ecological, and economic is subdivided into 5 modules. And integrating all these things, that makes 20 different aspects. Integrating all that, that's what you can do in design. And it should be the local groups who say, we think that, for instance, art is very important. We want to create art in our community. So they create this local community around art. If you want to have art and creating beautiful things as an important thing, well, I would advise you, for instance, to go and see Damanhur. That's what they've done. Everybody in Damanhur is an artist. And they have created incredible things. When you go there, you realize that everybody has the capacity to become an artist. So this is the way that this book can be used. You can see where are they especially good at some specific thing that I want in my community. I can go and learn about it. Some other place, they're very good at cleaning the wastewater. I can tell you that the tourists coming in the future, they appreciate to know that the wastewater is being cleaned and not just put into the ocean. Eh? So like you can see what are the best solutions around the world to do this in the proper way. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would like to say a few words before we open for discussion. We will break for lunch at about 1:15, so we are running about 15 minutes late. We have been building architecture of wonderful ideas. In every field, all our speakers have come up with some very practical, doable, and common sense ideas which can make Mallorca a beautiful place to live. Now, I would like to bring here, on this architecture of ideas, a little flag, because a beautiful building needs a flag. And my flag is flag of love. Why we want to make Mallorca sustainable, ecological, not out of fear, because there's a lot of fear around. Fear of doom and gloom and peak oil and peak tourism. When all this comes to an end, what are we going to do? Oh, we are afraid, so we have to do something. For me, coming from an Indian spiritual background, fear is not the right motivation for transformation and for change. There should be a better, more resilient, more sustainable motivation for transformation and transition and change. And that stronger motivation, more powerful motivation, is power of love. We want to love this beautiful land, this beautiful place, island, Mallorca. We want to love our trees. We want to love our oceans. Not we want to, we love our mountains. When I come to this house, I've been coming here for 5 years, and I say to Guillaume, I come to this paradise. This is like a paradise. So if you love your paradise, you will not pollute it. If you love your beautiful island, your love, you will not destroy it. So we want to protect it for its beauty, for its spirituality, for its serenity, for its integrity. Island of Mallorca has its own integrity, economic, social, cultural, traditional integrity. And we want to maintain that integrity for positive reasons. Not even if there was no peak oil, do you want to pollute your rivers? Even if there was no peak tourism, do you want to pollute and destroy your land? Do you want to become sort of dependent on imported items from around the world? So the fear is not the right motive. Love is the right motive. And then we will say that ecology and economy are the two legs on which we walk. At the moment, we are only walking in our mainstream society on one leg, the one leg of economy. Now, ecology and economy come from the Greek root, oikos, logos, nomos. Oikos means home. So Mallorca is our home. This is our home, oikos. Logos means knowledge of home. Know your home. Ecology, like logic. Logos means knowledge. Know your home. And then nomos, from which comes economy. Nomos means management of home. If you don't know your home, how are you going to manage it? In Mallorca, until now, the mainstream society in Palma and all that place which Susan mentioned, and the airport, they have been always focusing only on economy, economy, economy. What we want to focus is ecology and economy going together. knowledge comes before management. If you don't know your home, if you don't know where your bathroom is, where your living room is, where your garden is, how are you going to manage it? Can you manage your home without knowing it? So knowledge, and knowledge is not just information. Knowledge is a very beautiful and very profound word. Knowledge includes information, but knowledge also includes wisdom. Knowledge also includes experience. Just information you can get in the newspaper or in a book or on computers, on your internet. You can surf, you can get some superficial knowledge. But the knowledge which we want, ecology, the knowledge of our oikos, our home, is knowledge of relationships. What is a home if there is no relationship? When you go home, where are you going? You are going to a place of relationships. So we have to see what is our relationship with the land? What is our relationship with our mountains? What is our relationship, what Jose said about land and the relationship and ownership? He talked about ownership. We have to move from ownership to relationship. We don't own the land. Land owns us. Land does not belong to us. We belong to the land. So that kind of philosophical framework, what I call the flag of love, is necessary to bring hydropower, bring solar power, wind power, all the kinds of things you want to make practical, technical solutions. But if they are driven by motivation of ecology, motivation of the knowledge of the place, the sense of the place, the love of the place, then all your technological solutions will be in the right place. But if you are only focusing on technological solution without the idea of ecology, without the knowledge of the place, without the love of the place, without the sense of place, then even solar energy and wind energy and water energy may lead us astray, because we are only finding technical solutions. We can fill the whole island with windmills and solar things. That will not be the only solution. So love of the place, knowledge of the place, sense of the place, relationship with the place, that to me is the foundation upon which we can build this architecture and put the flag of love on it. Thank you very much.
My name is Joan, and well, I'm from Mallorca, that's all.
Okay.
I have just 60 seconds, I will be fast. I think that the economical, financial and economical crisis is a blessing. I hope that the barrel of oil doesn't reach $70. It goes to $500. And the whole world collapse, and the system collapse. And then the only idea that I have is to follow Guillaume's philosophy, because I do understand your position, but for me it's unreachable, it's hypothetical, because I do believe that democracy is dead and capitalism is collapsing today or maybe tomorrow. So if we do believe in loving our island, we have only one choice, which is acting locally to save our loving island. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Som empresari, estic al front de drets humans de Mallorca. Me preocupa molt tot el que s'ha dit. Estic molt d'acord amb en Joan. Aquesta situació s'ha d'arribar a exagerar en el màxim perquè Ventura reaccionen. Però cal dir diverses coses. Una és, siguem molt conscients de la quantitat de gent que deixarem a la cuneta tirada. A Mallorca hi ha gent que passa fam en aquests moments, i no exagera. Això és una qüestió. I l'altra qüestió, que jo la trobo al·lucinant, és que els Estats Units hagi anunciat que fa unes transferències de $700 1.000 milions de dòlars, en definitiva, per enfortir el sistema a risc i que no s'hagi parlat de res de la fam, per exemple. I Europa segueix el mateix camí, amb aquestes intervencions i tot això bancàries. Llavors, a mi l'únic que me preocupa és pensar en la quantitat de persones que ho passaran molt malament. Perquè serà així. Com podríem amorosir, com podríem suavitzar aquesta certa debacle que dins un futur més o menys pròxim se mos presenta, menys si veus alternatives.
Thank you. Do any panelists want to respond to this question of hunger and money? Yes, Susan. Susan, then Herbie, then yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm very glad that. I'm very glad you said that, because when I hear more or less that the worse it gets, the better it gets, I think that does really leave out masses of people. Don't forget that already in the financial crisis, a lot of secretaries have lost their jobs, ordinary people. A couple of million have lost their homes in the United States. There's going to be 2 million more. I don't think we can just say glibly that the worse it gets, the better it gets, and capitalism is collapsing. Maybe it is, but it has shown extraordinary resilience so far, and people are going to be left out, and it's very important that you said that. How can we prevent this disaster? I think it is through using what I would call green Keynesianism, which is, I just touched on it at the end of my presentation, but we are getting as citizens nothing in return for all of the money that's being poured into the banks. And that is why we have to demand, A, that the banks invest in certain projects which will be employment-creating projects, because people are going to lose their jobs in one sector, they must find work in another. That is also the case for tourism. Alternative tourism can provide hundreds of thousands of jobs, but not if you continue to do it as it is now. The model can be the conversion of the economy in the Second World War in the United States, which was accomplished in the space of 2 years. I can go into greater detail about how this was done, but it was a general mobilization. That's one thing. The second thing, to prevent this disaster of ordinary people being left out and going hungry and losing their homes and creating an even more unequal society than we've got now, they have spent 30 years creating an unequal society through all of the principles of neoliberalism. And Satish, I'm sorry, but they don't love anybody. And so that is what we have to repair. And we can do that if we think internationally. I'm all for local thinking, but I'm telling you now, taxes stop at the local and national level. And they have to be brought up to the European and the international level. And that is why movements like ATTAC and the Tax Justice Network have been working to find other sources of revenue which can be transformational in terms of ecology, but also in terms of society and the creation of decent, clean, green jobs. And that can be done through taxation on international financial transactions, on closing down tax havens, which are preventing income of at least $250 billion a year, and in various other kinds of taxes, which I could go into detail on if you're interested. But there are sources of finance, and we have to use them to invest in another scale, because otherwise it's absolutely true this crisis is going to be extremely destructive, but it can be used.
Thank you. Herbie?
I'm also very glad that you brought this point up, because let us face it, we are heading towards a world that can be extremely frightening unless we use our creativity, our dynamic thinking about these issues in a new and different way. And the good news is that anticipating this financial crisis that is now upon us, but also linking that thinking to the ecological crisis and the resources crisis that is also upon us, has brought out a lot of creativity in thinkers around the world. And just next week, on Wednesday, I think it is in London, UNEP will be announcing in London a project called A Green New Deal. And this is a brochure that was produced in anticipation of this by the New Economics Foundation in London, basically saying the critical issue for the future is employment for people, avoiding hunger, sustainable development, but from a perspective of how people can be center stage rather than financial manipulation being center stage. So I think we'll be out of these crises, these combined crises, we'll be hearing a lot about new initiatives on this area. The very good news is that if Obama and Biden get elected in the United States, they've already said that they will have a program of 5 million, what they call green-collar jobs. Firstly, for people in cities, and above all else, unemployed young people. More specifically about insulating buildings, about urban agriculture, about recycling, about reusing sewage for creating productive farmland for the future, and above all else, also for renewable energy. The fundamental difference between that vision of the future and the vision that is currently, unfortunately, being implemented by the powers that be is that the energy supply of the future will be from the sky for free. The energy itself will be for free. What we need is energy systems that convert that free energy into usable energy in our daily lives. And that is the fundamental difference between renewable energy and fossil fuel powered systems. So that in itself, these issues combined, will present us with an opportunity to fundamentally reshape the economic systems from the point of view of sustainable jobs, sustainable livelihoods for people, and certainly food production and food supplies is a critical part of that equation.
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you. Jose?
Yeah, I would like to say a few words. All of us heard about how many money was given for the banks, but I don't know if everybody calculate that what has been given for the bank is 20 times more than what we need to feed everybody and to stop with hunger. 20 times more. So this is quite interesting when you see this. But this is not enough. I think what we have to talk about also is the fact that all our governments are responsible with hunger. Because all our governments, and mostly United States and Europe, have been fighting to put agriculture in the negotiation of WTO. And this was in the beginning, in the 1986, in the Uruguay round. Before that, never agriculture was in this kind of thing. So this is only 22 years now. So we have to stop with this. And this is one of our first steps, is to say clearly, agriculture has nothing to do with this. WTO has to get out of agriculture. This is very important, and we have some power for that, because we can have power our governments and the European Union, which is one who is making the worst policy for agriculture in the world. And they are going to destroy even the European agriculture policy because they want to have the huge market of services all over the world. And they're going to change their agriculture policy against the policies for services. So this is also a very important issue. And we have now a lot of developing countries who are fighting also against this issue of agriculture in WTO. And that's why WTO has a lot of problems. It's about agriculture. And so this is, I think, something which is quite a hope for us, that a lot of people are struggling against the WTO, but firstly for agriculture. Because this is the most symbolic issue, and it's also the issue for most of the people all over the land. So I think this is important.
Thank you.
And in the same thing, we have to have a reflection about what is agriculture in the world. And I only give you three chiffres, three numbers. First number, and with these three numbers you understand what is agriculture about. The first number is how many farmers have a tractor. I don't know if you, in the world, 25 million. How many farmers have animals to work on the land? 250 millions. And how many farmers have only their arms and instruments to work the land? 1,300,000,000.
Wow.
That's the reality of farming. And that represents more than 50% of the people who are working on the earth.
Yeah.
More than 50%. So this is the reality of the world. So if you don't take care of these three numbers, no solution is possible.
Thank you. Thank you. There, please.
El meu nom és Joan Melé, vinc de Barcelona.
My name is Joan Mellet from Barcelona. I work in banking,
És una banca ètica, per això.
and it is an ethical bank. I'd like to say that. What's the name? It's Triodos Bank. He works for Triodos Bank, a European bank in Barcelona. It's extending around the world. I'd like to think about self-conscience, to make an self-analysis here. Because everything that the banks are doing, they're doing it with our money. So we are co-responsible of the financial crisis around the world, because it is a crisis of values, morals. It's a personal crisis for all of us. I've been 30 years in a bank, in a savings bank, and in all that time, nobody asked me what did we do with the money. They asked me what's going to be my mortgage price, how much interest are you going to give me, but no, not what am I going to invest the money into. People who are conscious, like people who are here, if we saw where everybody have their money invested, actually most of us would have the money in the banks that we're criticizing. So ethical banks should not be a minority thing. What we need is a change of personal conscience. I would be more radical than Susan George, not to tell our banks to make investments, certain investments, but rather to take the money out of those banks because they are financing arms dealing, drug money, prostitution money, fiscal havens. Almost all the banks in the world are doing it, including the ones in this country. Therefore, when we talk about money, everybody agrees with a change as long as it doesn't touch your own pocket. This is the first radical change. To actually take the money out of those banks and put them into ethical investment banks. There are many in Europe, although perhaps it's more comfortable for us not to do that.
Are you suggesting that there should be a Triodos Bank in Mallorca? Could you bring it to the Mallorcan situation and very briefly?
Bueno, nosaltres no tenim oficina a Mallorca.
We don't have an office in Mallorca, but I am responsible for Catalonia and Balearics, and we do sponsor projects in Mallorca. All the projects that we have now, culture, environment, ecology, social projects, all the people that have dreams, we finance them. We only finance projects here, local projects. There's also another bank here, Caja Colonia, which is also ethical. There are alternatives, but they're just not as comfortable. People don't want their life to be too complicated, and so they're not prepared to make those changes. So we are co-responsible. My proposal is, harder, more forceful than Susan George's. Let's take the money out of those banks and put them into the right banks. Good morning, I'm Toni Mengual from Caja Colonia, the other ethical bank here in Ibiza. It is the only ethical bank, in Mallorca. It is an entity, a bank, which is in Mallorca, or has a branch in Mallorca rather. It was founded in 1880 to fight against speculation, to help people to get out of difficult situations, to take control of their own lives and move forward. The ethics is within our DNA. We have impulsed this project of ethical bank that we would like everybody to invite to. Please join us. We're all big enough to know what we should do with our money. And if we want to invest in solidary things, we should be investing our monies into things that promote social cohesion. And this is why I'd like to invite you to participate in our project. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to make a comment on banking? Anything?
I would agree completely with the two gentlemen who suggest that you should move your accounts to one of their banks. We have in Denmark for many years backed a bank called the Mercury Bank, which is affiliated with Triodos, and almost all of the people in our circles who are working alternatively have accounts at this bank. And it is absolutely true what they are saying, that when you put your money into one of the big national banks, it's the sort of money that ends in Lehman Brothers and that sort of speculative activities. It does not being reinvested locally. And so that's one thing I would back up. Also, a comment to the lady about the center here in Mallorca. I think that's an excellent idea also, but I would say it's very important that there are people living there. We have throughout Europe a number of eco-villages who do this very thing. Most of the large eco-villages are teaching centers at the same time. But it's very important that the people who visit them can actually see what's happening and participate. We call it the living and learning principle. So it's not just looking, it's actually participating at the same time. So if there's anybody here who has some ideas about forming such a project, then I think you should call it an eco-village and get together.
Okay, good.
I just wanted to make a point about money, which really astounded me the other day. I was Googling, as one does these days, and I put the two words sustainable and money together and put them into Google. And to my absolute astonishment, I found not a single reference to the idea of sustainable money. That even Triodos doesn't seem to be using that type of fusion of two words. And I find this is really remarkable. And the only conclusion I come to is that by definition, at the moment, money is the ultimate unsustainable thing. And clearly, when we have a vision about the future of an island, we need to think about how money can be used in the service of sustainability in new ways. So let us really have a discussion of what that means, particularly in the context of a global financial crisis. What does it mean for money to be there solely for the purpose of creating a sustainable lifestyle on this island? So again, I think the idea of a future fund that I raised earlier on could be discussed in that context. How can we create money systems that assure that future generations benefit, and not just the here and now and the day after tomorrow? That's no longer good enough as a concept for money.
Susan?
Well, what somebody I think was very wise said. He said, all for ourselves and nothing for other people seems in every age of the world to have been the vile maxim of the masters of mankind. Now, all for ourselves and nothing for other people is still the vile maxim of the masters of mankind, and that was not Karl Marx who said that. That was Adam Smith, who is the father of capitalist theory, and he says this towards the end of The Wealth of Nations. So let's just remember that as a class, those are the people that we have to try to get under control, because if there are no rules and if there are no macro solutions, they will go on doing the same things that they have been doing for 2 centuries, which is to say destroy the planet and accumulate all for themselves and nothing for other people, which is what we have seen intensified in the last 30 years. So
what you are saying is that there is no contradiction between ethical investment and putting money in banks where local projects, alternative projects can be financed, but at the same time, don't forget the big banks will be there, and they should also be transformed into right action.
And that has to be done legally through rules that force them to behave in certain ways, because if it's voluntary, they won't do it.
They won't do it.
And just one footnote, I mean,
Thank you.
That's very important. That is the problem. It's the problem.
what I think I would like to see come out of this 2 days that we have together here is taking the document that you already have, which is a very important and significant dossier of problems, and saying, okay, what are the solutions to these problems? I would like to see the result of this 2-day meeting to be a manifesto on a sustainable Mallorca, starting off by all means with financial systems and sustainable money, looking then at sustainable energy systems, looking at sustainable farming systems, sustainable transport systems, and above all else, all of that connected to employment and job creation on a sustainable basis. If we can come out of these 2 days with a document that can galvanize the population of this island in such a way that they will consider seriously alternative political options above and beyond the ones that are currently kind of mirages that ultimately have very little relationship to reality, and particularly the reality of a world that is now challenged not only financially but also in terms of resources, in terms of pollution, climate change. You've just referred to that. If we can have that kind of outcome of this meeting, that we will really have achieved something. But we need no less than that, I think, ultimately to come out of these 2 days.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you. Jose?
Yeah, just only a few words to answer. Is it possible? How can we help people to change themselves? Well, you know, it's difficult to ask somebody who has a lot of money and a lot of power to change himself. So we have to help him. Because his situation is more difficult from the other who has nothing. So this was in the New Testament, of course. But, so how can we help him? You were talking about people who had maybe 10 houses, and they are closed because there's nobody on holidays, and people here on the island have no house. So what can you do? First thing, I think it's going to see that man and tell me, okay, you have 10 houses. Maybe you can live very correctly with only 9. So we ask you to give 1 for the people who don't have houses. This is very kind. But be careful if you don't do it that way. Maybe people are going to take the 10 of your. So maybe we can make a deal. You're beginning by giving 1. But you would do it yourself. And we stay in front of your house. And we stay in front of your house until you gave 1 house. We don't ask you to give them all, but give 1. And we stay in front of you. We stay peacefully in front of you. You know, this is, I didn't invent this. This is what was happening in India.
Yeah.
This was the Vinobas movement.
Vinobas movement.
In the 50s. And they gathered like that more than 5 million hectares from the big owners. And they stay in the villages, village by village by village, they did this. So if it was possible in front of the big owners of land, why isn't it possible in front of the owners of houses here? This is an example.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's very good. Om in Sanskrit means whole, everything included, nothing excluded. like in English and Latin, also you say omnipresent, omnipotent, the same root, Om. Amen, Om, same root. And the Shanti means peace. And we say Shanti 3 times, so that there's a, I haven't got my microphone. How we change our own consciousness by having peace with yourself. If you don't make peace with yourself, you cannot make peace in the world. But then we also we cannot stop just peace with ourselves. We have to make peace in the world, with all people, all cultures, all religions, with everybody, all nations. And then also we have to make peace with the earth, because the earth is our primary community. Mallorca, first of all, is the land, is our community. And then people are our community. We don't just think about people, we also think about land, about the earth. So making peace with the earth is part of that. So those are the 3 pieces of Shanti. Now this session, Alberto.
Okay, thank you, Satish. You didn't warn me I'd be first. So, but what I wanted to stress this morning was the principle that you don't destroy and try to start over. You convert, you rethink, you see space in a different way and the use of that space in a different way, and maybe in a different time. You have to look at the dimensions again. And that is why I suggested that probably the era of mass tourism, at least in the Western countries, is over. And I will say for our new participants also that I was astonished to learn that apparently, maybe you have a study, but apparently no cost, benefit, input, output study of tourism has been made. And I would bet that if such a study was made, taking in all of the costs, including the dependency costs, the costs of inputs like energy, food, water, but also the treatment of waste, of pollution, and the degradation of the landscape, one would find that mass tourism was probably costing the island a great deal, rather than bringing it much of an advantage, and that what advantage came in would probably go to a very, very small slice of the population. Of course, there are many thousands of people working in the tourist industry, but the real money must be going somewhere else. That is what I would bet, but in the absence of a study, we don't know. So that would be step 1, have a serious study done like that with people from a great many different disciplines. Then, if it is true that mass tourism is costly, if it is true that mass tourism is going to decline anyway, why not think about a kind of cultural knowledge and what I would call immaterial tourism? Not that people don't have to be fed and housed, of course they do, but that they would be coming here because Mallorca would be reinventing itself as what I am calling a celebration of the Mediterranean. Now, maybe there's a better word for that. You could say the jewel of the Mediterranean, or you could say the pearl, or whatever. Yeah. But I'm saying the celebration because I think that it should reinvent itself as a place which has always been here in the Mediterranean, which has the longest history in civilization, along with Persia, but the Mediterranean is where our civilization, anyway, really began. And when I say Mediterranean, I mean the whole north and south and eastern coasts. And that you have sun, climate, and coast, but you also have access to this huge cultural patrimony. So every month, first of all, I'd set up a really good team of people from inside and outside who could organize different events around a theme, either every month or every 2 months or whatever periodicity. But I just jotted down a few ideas. Other people would have other ones. but you could have Mediterranean archaeology and have everybody who's important in Mediterranean archaeology and have movies shown outside and have, that would be the theme for that month or those 2 months. And you would have colloquia, you would have exhibits, you would have interactive audio visuals, you would have kids learning what it is to be an archaeologist, and where everybody is on the north and south coast of the Mediterranean. For instance, you could say, what has been the history of navigation and travel in the Mediterranean since Ulysses went on his voyage? You know? And you could study that from all points of view, travel, shipping, what that's doing to the sea now, etc. You could do one on food, clearly. All kinds of different, where does it come from? How is it changing? You could do one on the flora and the fauna. You could do one on literature and poetry. And films, of course. You could do one on religion, so I'd be very careful about that. And you could do one on architecture, art, and design.
Yeah.
But I can see these different themes being developed by different teams, which would be coming from inside and outside, and providing you with the scenography, if I may say, and the kinds of uses that could be made of this island without destroying it, and bringing in people who would come because that was, and this would be an exportable model, because you're better off, I would say, than Cyprus or Malta or even Sicily and other islands, because you're close to France, Italy, and Spain, and people have the habit of coming here. So there would be a lot of things that could be added to this concept. But the other thing I wanted to say before I stop, Satish, is that I think there is one major conversion that should be made. If mass tourism is going to go down, then I know the Mallorcans joke about being an airport with a city attached to it. And I wonder if the airport could not be looked at in a different spatial way, and if that airport could not be turned into what I called eco-país, which could not become a permanent and temporary space for ecological exhibits, for everything that's going on in the whole area of ecology, from technology to basic knowledge to interactive to urban gardens to whatever. But that would be a conversion of a space which seems to me much too large.
Just